Hello and welcome back. And we finally have another full album review for you today. This is one of two that I've been working on, with the next one being Warfront by Windrose, which is a dwarven power metal band. But this one, as you have seen by the title, the thumbnail, and probably, if you remember, from the 17th episode of the Six Song Roundup, is Ritual Hymns by Worm Shepherd. Now, this is the second album by the Blackened Symphonic Deathcore Giants, which you may be saying, well, it's only their second album, but they have really solidified themselves in two albums as some of the bigger players in this genre. Their first album being originally released actually in 2020, and that was called In the Wake of Sol. I haven't actually listened to that one, but it is in my radar to listen to at some point. So, vocalist Devin Duarte, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, has also done guest vocals for songs with bands such as Brojob on their Jester EP as well, which just a little bit of like trivia there for you. So Ritual Hymns is a 9-song album clocking in at 52 minutes. So let's go and kick it in to track number 1, the title track Ritual Hymns, which starts with a 6-minute 43 opening track. So we start off with a very symphonic open with about, I think it was 1 minute 30 seconds worth of intro, which builds nicely into the song's full state, and the vocals are thick and blackened in delivery. The drums are fast and well paced and well done. Same goes for the guitars. And about halfway through the track we get this really solid breakdown that goes hard. And I especially like the last verse of this track, which reads, "I live in fear, hunted under the sun. Haunted beneath the moon, the fear of eternal isolation tears me from the light into the wake of sun, securing my mortality with the swords. Crown me in vine and calm your storms with my marrow." There's a lot in there, and a lot of, like, extravagant words, I guess, like, calm the storms with my marrow is kind of a weird one, and like the whole eternal isolation, mortality, hunted under the sun, haunted beneath the moon. It almost feels like it's coming from a very tortured soul. And the delivery of this is done really well, in my opinion. But with that being said, we are going to move on to discussing track number 2 of Sword and Nail, which is 4 minutes and 9 seconds. Now, when I'm saying of as well, they don't spell it OF, they're spelling it OV, because it's proper like black metal, true cult, kind of cool to do that shit. Actually, with how often it was done in this, and I was like typing bits of this up on my phone before I transferred it to paper, my phone has actually started auto-correcting OV to OV because of this album. Yeah. The short intro to this one had some groove before the first line is delivered, which is, "I watched as the Lamb opened the first of the 7 seals," which flows on the second verse and sees some high vocals slither into the mix, and throughout this the delivery and pronunciation is really solid until a little later, where it has almost this slam style delivery, and it is just kind of pure sludgy, filthy, gnarly heaviness. And again, the drums go nuts at this point. But again, Very solid track. Moving on, we have track number 3, The Raven's Keep, which is 5 minutes and 16 seconds. So, as some of them do on this album, this one builds very slowly with echoey effect vocals before an ominous drum guitar loop starts to build up before the lyrics. The vocal delivery is a little more deathcore on this one and a little less blackened, and I feel it kind of changes the style of it a bit, but it keeps in the vibe of the whole album, and it kind of just makes this one feel a little bit different and breaks up the monotony a little bit. It's not a big departure from their other sound like on the other songs, but it's enough to keep it feeling fresh, and it's still a really decent track. Lyrically, it's really short, just having about 3 different verses repeated throughout it, according to Genius, which is where I find all of my lyrics. And near verse 3's end, it ties back to the last track that I reviewed by saying, "The 7th seal split before my eyes long ago. I was born to complete a prophecy," with the reference being, of course, to the 7th seal line, where they referenced the lamb opening the first of 7 seals in particular, and then it fades out before track 4 comes in. I'm not 100% sure what the 7th seal is referencing. I feel like with how often and like it's brought up, there must be some sort of connection to something or some kind of annotation for it, but I'm not 100% sure, quite frankly. But anyway, track 4, Chalice of Rebirth, 4:19. I feel like this is the first band I've seen use the word metacarpals in their lyrics. The vocals are crisp and filthy, the musicianship is on point, still, and the atmospheric breakdown before a nasty breakdown. That doesn't make sense. The atmospheric break before the nasty breakdown. That sounds better. That goes straight for the throat is just kind of like, holy shit. Overall, it's quite a good track that I think was one of the singles off of the album, but I'm not 100% sure if it was or not. But yeah, not a lot to say on that one. Moving on, we have track number 5, which is Blood Kingdom, 7 minutes and 11 seconds. The theme of 4 minute song, longer track, 4 minute song, longer track continues here with this one, and it goes off pretty quickly. I once again will point out too how fast paced and well produced the drums are here, as Devon, I'm assuming it's Devon, because I know some American people pronounce it Devon, but I'm going to say Devon because obviously that's how we pronounce it down where I'm from in the UK, just unleashes absolute hell over it. The verses here are dense and chock full of imagery and lines like, "Licking my lips at the horrors above, witness to horrors that surround before being gripped with incessant suffering," which this is just a full throttle track, honestly, which I 100% enjoyed all of its delights that it brought to the table, and it was one of the strongest tracks on the album in my personal opinion. So we're going to move on now to track 6, Wilted Moon, 4 minutes and 40 seconds. Now entering the final stretch here with the final 4 tracks, and this one has a really definitive, solid blackened vibe written all over it. From delivery to pacing, etc., there's not too many verses, but what we do have is dripping in cool lines like, "I offer my indisposed shell to the contorted shadows lingering across my room," or lines such as, "Hunted by the clergy I chose, let me go. I wish to decompose, constricted by crippling insecurity. Which were just two of many lines I could have chosen. He also has we also have a sick drum section in this track, which is phenomenal. And they actually use that to end the track, I believe. And I think that was actually quite a good way of closing the track out, personally. So, moving on to track number 7 now is A Bird in the Dusk, which is 6 minutes and 33 seconds and features Scott of Carnifex. So, in a previous review of this track, when it was released as a single, I surmised that the guitar work was beautiful, the vocals muddy and blackened, with all ranges being covered in a disgustingly great level of pacing, and the brutality of when Scott came in near the end added an extra level of epicness. What I never mentioned was the breakdown before all of that, and how blisteringly fiery it was, because fuck me, it was gnarly, and I loved it. And it, again, one of the better tracks on this album. And a very solid choice to choose as a single from it. Moving on, we have track number 8, The River of Knives, 5 minutes 28 seconds. And this is the penultimate one here, and it starts with melodic, almost singing, that is quickly killed off, and quickly we're off to the races with lines like, the horns formed in matching peril, as well as their screams no sound louder than nothingness. And finally, plunge the ashen blade through the chest of my origin. Hooded Father, I cry upon the altar, I repeat your message in circles. Which, again, this band does a really good job of just writing some fucking awesome lyrics with really good imagery, really cool, like, just lines you can pull out and be like, damn, that's actually kind of cool, you know? And it really is interesting to go through their lyrics on, like, Genius or whatever sites you might use, and just kind of scroll through it as you're listening and be like, oh, okay, yeah. And, like, it really does just kind of vibe with the atmosphere of the music. Throughout this as well, the band shreds, and there is a semi-snarl similar to that of Will Ramos in, I think it was To the Hellfire. Like, it's a very similar style to that, but it's not as pronounced or exaggerated, this happens during a breakdown banger. And yeah, again, the last 4 tracks of this album are some of the strongest on the entire thing. With that being said, we are moving on to the very final track, which is track number 9, Winter Sun. And this clocks in at 8 minutes 20 seconds. So this is the final and the longest track on the album, and it starts off quickly and hardly relents. One line I loved was, a slave to death, a slave to love, a slave to perception, which really kind of sums up life and how we all kind of live our lives, just slaves to working to the grave, wanting to be loved, and working to make sure people perceive us in a good light, you know? That's all we really want. The later half of the song slows to a chugging pace and feels kind of slow, low, grimy as fuck. And it's a very solid album closing track. I don't think you really could have chosen a better one if you'd tried. But yeah, so we're going to move on to my final thoughts now and then get into the top tracks. So, as much as I really enjoyed this album and its style, it does feel like it could get old if it was more than the 9 tracks that they did on this album, or even if they don't maybe switch up into slower tones, etc., or if they don't, like, for the next album try a different sound, because it is very samey, and it can get a little bit tedious, even though it is a very good sound that they have perfected quite quickly. But like I said, this is only the band's second album, so there's room to experiment, room to grow. Devin Duarte is already kind of, you know, put his foot in the door as one of the generation's next big vocalists. Like, you know, when you've got people like Will Ramos to compete with, you've managed to get Scott of Carnifex on a track. He doesn't do, you know, feature tracks with just anybody. He has to really enjoy what you do to kind of feature with you, which is cool. It was kind of interesting to see him feature on the Bro Job song for their Jester EP. That was kind of unexpected. Like, he's really doing everything he can to make sure people know who he is and who Worm Shepherd are. Like I said, in I think their first album, they had Alex Kohler of ex-Chelsea Grin fame on it in one of their songs, and that's also pretty fucking cool. That's actually the first song that kind of put them on my radar, was the song with Alex. But yeah, I would say this album for me is definitely a solid 8.5 out of 10. And the only way that I would have basically said that they could make this album better is if they just kind of switched it up a little bit throughout the tracks, and just kind of, other than just like the very blackened deathcore breakdowns and stuff like this and the atmospheric opens, maybe if they threw in an instrumental track just kind of halfway through to break it up. So like maybe the 5th track was like an instrumental, and then you rounded it out to 10 tracks long, you have an instrumental, then you had like the sick vocals, the really well done atmospherics, the breakdowns, the great musicianship. That could have rounded it out and given it a much more solid feel to me. But again, this is only the band's second album. They have a lot of room to grow, a lot of room to experiment, and I'm still a fan, and I still really fucking enjoyed this album. Just because I've said it's only an 8.5, like, there's no slight to them. You know, I don't really give that lower ratings unless it's really shit. I can't remember what the lowest is I've given, actually. I would have to go back through and check all of that. But yeah, like I said, I'm excited to see where Worm Shepherd go. I'm excited to hear what they've got for us next. I do believe I saw somewhere they're already working on new music, which is fucking nuts. These guys have got such a great work ethic. But yeah, my top tracks: number 1, Ritual Hymns, the opening. Number 2, Bird in the Dusk, featuring Scott of Carnifex. Track 3, Winter Sun. Track 4, Blood Kingdom. Those will give you a very good feel of the overall tone and ferocity and style of this album in particular, and maybe Worm Shepherd as a whole. But if you don't like those 4 tracks, you're probably not going to be a fan of this band, especially if you're not a big fan of blackened symphonic deathcore as well, which is really what this band very, very well leans into. But yeah, so there we go. That was Worm Shepherd, Ritual Hymns. 8.5 out of 10. Very solid album. And with that being said, I will see you guys in the next video, which will be something a little different. It's going to be Warfront by Windrose. Like I said, we're going for a bit of a dwarven power metal vibe on that next review. It's all written up on my phone. I've just got to write it out, create a thumbnail, and then I will be probably dropping that within the next week or 2, as I'm gonna get ready and probably crack out 2, 3 6-song reviews ready for you, and kind of choose what album is next on my list to tackle down. So with that being said, as always, I will see you guys in the next video, and remember to stay safe out there, my friends. Goodbye.